looking at his rushing and receiving total, which is currently at 75.5. Let's look at Deebo Samuel, what he might be able to do in the rushing part of the prop. Okay, he's got 40 carries in 17 games played this year. He had 3 carries in the NFC Championship game. 8 times this season, Samuel has had at least 3 rushing attempts. That's a pretty decent number for a wide receiver. I wouldn't be surprised if he had even more here. I think Kyle Shanahan's going to dip into his bag of tricks. I think he's going to try to attack that Kansas City run defense that I mentioned is 27th in DVOA in some unique ways. And I know in the NFC Championship game, guys, Samuel, those 3 rush attempts only netted 7 yards, and he had no rush attempts against the Packers. But over the course of the season, 28% of Samuel's rush attempts have gone for 10 or more yards. So we talk about the possibility of a quote-unquote big play. I think Samuel can potentially break one running the football here. Going back to the regular season, after he came back from injury, Samuel had at least 1 run of 11 yards in 6 of the final 9 regular season games. He averaged 15 rushing yards per game for the entire season. Again, Chiefs 27th DVOA against the run. So that's rushing. Let's go to the receiving part of the program. Kansas City's defense, no doubt about it, very good at shutting down receivers. So I would not want to be betting Samuel's over on his number of receptions. But again, I think there's a likelihood he's going to have one big one. Why do I say that? Among all receivers in the league who had at least 20 targets this season, Samuel was number 1 in yards after the catch. 8.7 yards after the catch is what he averages. For a guy who averages nearly 15 yards per reception, Teddy, just over 6 yards per rush attempt, I don't think we're going to need a ton of touches here for him to go over this rushing and receiving prop. Over 75.5 is how I would play this heavily hyped, much anticipated Deebo Samuel prop.
So when it comes to Deebo, you talked about those season-long stats. His last 6 games dating back to mid-December, average yards for reception, 12, 11.8, 7.4, 10.5, 12, 11.1. He has a grand total of 1 catch in the last 6 games. That's longer than 20 yards. Rushing the last 6 games, he has a total of 3 rushes for longer than 10 yards during that span. So the season-long stats are showing all of these big plays for Deebo. We didn't see a whole lot of that down the stretch. One would think defensively, there's one guy Kansas City wants to make sure we're not going to let this guy beat us. If I'm Spags, that'd be Deebo. Does any of that worry about you? Does any of that worry you?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's a lot that worries me. But, here's the thing. I think Kyle Shanahan is and again, see, that's why I don't want to do just individual rushing or individual receiving. I just like to me, playing it this way, I think there's more paths to victory. I think, in one of those ways, he's going to break one. And Kyle Shanahan's a very, very good play caller. He's had 2 weeks to scheme. I think he could come up with something. And again, 75.5 yards. What do we need? Probably, even if he hits those average, what are we going to need, baby? I think if he has 6 or 7 plays, I think he can go over this. No doubt about it. If positive plays, I think he's going to be able to go over this. The yards after the catch is very real. And again, yes, you talk about that short sample size, Teddy, down the stretch. He didn't do much of anything against Green Bay, which stunned me, given how bad Joe Barry's defense was down the season. So, short term, it can always leave us scratching our heads, right? We would have thought the 49ers would have put up a ton of points in that game against the struggling Green Bay defense. They really did it. So just, to me, I always am looking to buy low and sell high. And I think this is buy low on Deebo time because, as you mentioned, he hasn't maybe had those big plays recently, but if you look at the season as a whole, he certainly has. And I think he has 1 or 2 big ones on Sunday.